This video is sponsored by World Anvil. What do you put on the back of your Game Master's screen? If you buy a pre-published screen, the designers will put the information they think is valuable, the stuff they imagine you'll need to reference during a game. And sometimes that can be a really valuable way to figure out how the game is intended to work, as these screens essentially tell you what the designers think you need to know in order to run their game. But that doesn't always mean that they're correct about what most GMs actually use in their games, let alone what you specifically need. In my experience, the back of a Game Master screen is best suited for the stuff you want to keep reminding yourself about, or rules you keep getting wrong. So ultimately, the answer to what do you put on the inside of your Game Master screen is completely personal to you and your relationship with whatever game you're currently playing. However, if I just sit here and say, nobody can tell you what should go on the back of your screen, that's not very useful or interesting, and it's going to be a pretty short video. Plus, I use these videos as an excuse to get things done for my game, and since I now have a custom GM screen, and I'm getting ready for a 5e one-shot, we're going to go through what typically goes on the back of the published 5e GM screens, what I put on the back of mine, and what I'm going to put on the back of mine for this upcoming game that I'm getting ready to run. And hopefully watching me do this will give you some insight into what you might need to put on the back of your own GM screen. Now, as of right now, I'm expecting to run this game using the 2014 rules for D&D since I don't have the 2024 rules yet. But even if I did, I wouldn't be ready to make a new GM screen for myself just yet, because I don't really know what rules I need reminders for, and I won't know until I run a couple of games in that system, and that probably will not be for at least a couple of months. My relationship with which rules I need on the back of my screen has also changed, considering I've gone without a screen for about 4 years now, thanks to running most of my games virtually. I will often have my DM screen out as well, but it's not very easy or convenient to reference during an online game. So I'm going to be very curious to find out which rules and resources I think I still need on the back of my screen, and which ones I should be able to do without. However, the painful experience of running all those online games without a GM screen would have been a lot less painful if I'd used today's sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is a fantastic online toolkit that you can use to keep track of the details of your campaign setting by using their incredible templates to create articles for anything you want. NPCs, magic items, monsters, destinations, whatever you need. And they also provide a digital DM screen. You can upload the relevant information about your campaign and your player characters, you can pull up monster stat blocks and music, quickly find or create NPCs, and send messages to your players, all through the same portal. It's honestly something I should have been using for years. It would have saved me so much wasted time and energy and given me a much better place to consolidate my notes rather than having a whole bunch of Google Docs open at once while I'm running a game. This is definitely better. It is a huge quality of life improvement. And World Anvil is offering a discount to the viewers of this channel. If you visit worldanvil.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK, you can save 51% off of any annual membership. That's more than 50% off. It's even more than 49% off, though I might have to check my work on that one. Once again, visit worldanvil.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK at checkout. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. Now, first things first, we're going to take a look at some example GM screens to see what kind of stuff they put on the inside. For example, if we look at the Shadowdark GM screen, the panel has a chart for you to roll info about NPCs. Age, ancestry, alignment, how wealthy they are, and a couple of characteristics about them. For example, we roll on these charts and we get a dwarven child who is chaotic, as all children are, and has the standard amount of wealth, so this is a middle-class chaotic dwarven child. We can roll for a trait about this child and we get muscular. This is a muscular dwarven child. The second panel is still dedicated to NPC generation. It gives us a list of names by syllable, so you can roll randomly and get a bunch of syllables and put together a name. Like, if we roll an 11, a 15, a 4, and a 6, that gives us Tenoch Boz, which sounds very Star Warsy to me, but I think it could also work for a dwarf. And we get an occupation. We roll 2 d4s, we get a 3 and a 1, and that's the baker. Makes sense, it's kind of like a dwarven version of Peeta from the Hunger Games. He's a kid who works in the bakery. He's muscular because he spends all day kneading the dough. So that's half the GM screen entirely dedicated to rolling up some random NPC. Next, we have a bunch of charts for random encounters. How frequently they occur, how close the monsters or creatures are to the party, what they're currently doing, are they hunting, are they eating, are they playing, are they sleeping, and a chart to determine their reaction to the party. And on the same panel, we get a chart to determine unique features about treasure. For example, we roll 2 2s and we learn that some treasure item is misshapen. That could be interesting. And the final panel has more information about treasure, a chart to determine how much XP something is worth, and a list of luxury items the players can find. So already this tells you a ton about the game in question. Across 4 panels, only a little bit more than 1/2 of one panel, just over 1/8 of the screen, is connected to stuff that might be relevant to combat, that being the random encounter section. And notice we don't actually have any combat-related rules in this chart. That should tell you a lot. Sure, the game has fighting in it. You do fight monsters. But based on this chart, do you imagine this game is about fighting monsters? No, it's about exploration. These charts primarily help you adjudicate what happens when your players make a discovery. They found an NPC, or they found something is connected to an NPC. Who is it? They roll a random encounter. Where is it? What's it doing? And what's it going to do? And they found some treasure. how do you make that treasure more interesting, and how much is it worth? This is all designed to supplement the charts that you'll be more likely to have open in front of you, like the chart of random encounters or random treasures. The goal behind putting these specific charts in the GM screen is so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth between the list of random encounters for a given area and the reaction roll chart. That's why that chart is on the GM screen. On the flip side, we get the GM screen for Curse of Strahd. We have a list of random encounters in Castle Ravenloft, and then the isometric map of Castle Ravenloft. Then we have the lists of random encounters in Barovia overall, a list of Barovian names, and a map with a key of relevant locations. And this just is not at all useful to me as a GM running Curse of Strahd. I find the process of trying to read and decipher a map on the back of a GM screen to be really frustrating and tiresome. And while that's less of an issue for the overall map of Barovia, like having a key of where everything is located isn't a terrible idea, the map of Castle Ravenloft is not all that helpful to me because I have to squint and grab the screen and pull it close to my face to read a map that's this complicated. And if something is going to be so complex that I have to pick it up and get it closer to me to read it, then I don't think that thing should be stuck on the back of my GM screen. And this seems to be a problem in general with location-specific GM screens. I own hard copies of a couple of adventures that were published while the 5e rules were being playtested, the first time around, and so these adventures are actually touted as being compatible with D&D 3.5, 4th edition, and D&D Next, which was the project name for 5th edition. Now, those are three very different games, to say nothing of the fact that D&D Next was actively being playtested, and so the rules weren't even finished. So obviously, these screens cannot contain any rules. Like, that simply would not have been possible. So instead, they act as resources for the setting of the adventure. The GM screen for Murder in Baldur's Gate, once again, is maybe scaled a little bit too small for my liking, but it does have an enormous number of useful resources for an urban campaign. You've got a random generator for shop names and functions, a very quick and dirty NPC name generator, 2 maps of Baldur's Gate that take up the center 2 panels, both of which have keys for dozens of different locations, and then the final panel offers random street encounters and ranks of the Watch, the Flaming Fist, and the Guild, so you can figure out who exactly the characters are running into. I haven't run this adventure yet, although I really should, but I would imagine that this would be a very helpful GM screen when running a Baldur's Gate adventure. And the side featuring the players also has a keyed map of Baldur's Gate, so your players can see different locations and be able to get their bearings. That's actually enormously helpful. I don't personally prefer having a map on the inside of my screen. It just, like I said, generally is not that useful to me, but having one on the outside, I think is terrific. I also have a copy of Legacy of the Crystal Shard, which was also supposedly compatible with 3 different editions of the game, so once again, it didn't have any rules on the GM screen included with the adventure. We do get another interior map, and I think this one is even less helpful, like, just give me a map handout at this point, and there's a ton of different encounter rules for different areas of 10 towns in the surrounding regions. I haven't run this adventure yet either, so I don't know, maybe these are actually incredibly useful for the adventure, but this screen just does not do that much for me. But once again, I'm not surprised. They didn't have any finished rules they could include on the screen. It's not one of the other D&D Next adventures like Scourge of the Sword Coast and Vault of the Dracolich didn't come with the GM screen, at least as far as I can tell, because what were the creators supposed to put on those screens when the rules weren't even done yet? Then in 2014, we got the official Dungeon Master screen for the new edition of D&D. And let's review what they thought was going to be so important to the game that it had to be on the GM screen. First, we get roles to help generate NPCs, characteristics, ideals, bonds, flaws, and a name generator. Next, we get some conditions and their definitions. Then we get some general rules like different difficulty levels, rules about cover, a list of skills and what ability score they correspond to, travel pace, encounter distance, improvised damage, and then a chart labeled Something Happens with an exclamation point. And then quick finds for things the party could discover. And we as a community collectively agree that this Dungeon Master's screen was underwhelming. Now, not everything on here is terrible. Having the conditions on here taking up the bulk of the screen is great because those are exactly the sort of thing you just want to be able to consult at a glance. Similarly, there was other great rules included, like cover, setting DCs, skills and associated abilities, and damage by level and severity, although more on that later. But there are other items on this screen that just make you scratch your head. For example, let's look at the list of NPC traits. I'm not going to pretend these lists of traits aren't useful when you need to improvise an NPC. But you know what might be more helpful? What species they are, what they do, the superficial stuff that actually helps dictate the role they play in the story. Plus, a good chunk of the corner of this panel is taken up by artwork. It's lovely, sure, but there was more room to make these charts more useful. Or let's take a look at Something Happens. In theory, this is a great idea. However, this chart is very uneven. The first result is a door opens. And look, I don't want to spend all day comparing D&D to a game that wasn't even out yet, but I'm just saying that the Shadowdark version of that entry would probably say something like, a door opens and 2d6 dwarves tumble through, clutching a treasure map and babbling about eldritch abominations. But again, let's hear some of these results. A meteor shoots across the sky. Sounds cool, maybe it crashes and everyone tries to harvest the metal. A strange gust of wind blows through. Okay, that's a nice bit of moody atmospheric set dressing, but there's not much more we can do with that one. Somebody glimpses the future. Okay, cool, awesome, there's a lot we can do with that. Someone gets angry. Okay, kind of limiting. And the whole chart is like that. One of the entries reads, someone has to go to the bathroom. Y'all, we are really stretching the definition of something happens to include a whole bunch of bullshit. No pun intended. And Quick Finds isn't much better, with such inspiring entries as map and monster parts next to entries like artwork and food or drink. I'm not saying nobody could be inspired by these entries, that's absolutely not my point. But I do doubt that the average newbie dungeon master will have any idea at all what to do with these, we'll charitably call them prompts. Especially if they learned to DM from reading the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's a topic for a whole other day. So it wasn't long before I augmented my own GM screen to include stuff that I thought would be more useful. So this is what my screen looks like. I printed out or jotted down the rules I needed help remembering, and I taped them to the inside of my screen. That includes saving throw DCs and attack bonuses for traps, rules on adjudicating areas of effect for Theater of the Mind games, the cost of spellcasting services in town, rules on concentration checks, and that confusing rule about casting a leveled spell with your bonus action and a cantrip as your action. I've got the definition of resistance and vulnerability, how much healing you get from each level healing potion, rules for falling damage, rules for getting hit with a critical while you're unconscious, which is somehow not on the back of this screen, prices for food and drink and lodging, prices for selling and crafting magic items, prices of magic items by rarity, the description of the spell scroll directly from the DMG, and an expanded version of improvising damage, because the charts on the screen didn't give any examples, so it was hard to use that to adjudicate what sort of damage you should take if you get hit with something crazy, which is the entire point of the chart, and they didn't include the context that actually makes it useful. Plus a couple of notes that were just helpful reminders for myself, like how players add their constitution modifier when rolling hit dice. A lot of players just had a hard time remembering that at the time. So, for some reason, I guess the folks at Wizards of the Coast eventually decided that the GM screen needed some work, so in 2017 they released the Dungeon Master Screen Reincarnated, very appropriate name because it implies we mocked the original DM screen so hard that it died. And this screen was a huge improvement. You've got actions in combat, things you can do on your turn, which are two separate things, both pretty easy to read. Then you've got 4 of the rules that I have the hardest time remembering: long jump, high jump, suffocation, and concentration. Then we get the conditions, just like before. Once again, no complaints there. Part of me does wish all the conditions fit on one panel of the DM screen, but I also like having the artwork next to each one. It helps break up the text. My eyes tend to roll off panels that are just fully text, so I could take it or leave it either way. I'm not too picky about that one. Then we get the rules for setting a DC, as well as a chart on DCs for tracking your quarry. We get the damage by level and severity chart. Once again, it's without the context of improvised damage or traps, which is frustrating. Then object hit points and object armor class, a great addition to the screen. Skills and associated abilities, travel pace, and then a new chart. Services for hiring a coach cab, a hireling, a messenger, paying a toll, or booking passage on a ship. Then we get a repeat of obscured areas and encounter distance, cover, and light. And finally, food, drink, and lodging prices, just like I had on my own screen. And this screen still has 2 pieces of art on the edges, but now it's not just stylistic, it also includes information. One of them is the diagram of the different shapes spells take whenever you cast them, and the other is a size chart. So you still have some art to help keep it from just being 4 walls of text, but we also get something that doesn't waste the space on the screen, so it's actually really smart design. Overall, the screen wasn't 100% perfect for my needs, but it is a huge improvement. Plus, I had a lot more familiarity with the system by this point, so there were some rules I didn't need on the board anymore, not because they weren't valuable to be on the DM screen, but just because I no longer needed them. I remember the rules for the different levels of healing potions now, and for falling damage, and critical hits when you're unconscious, so I don't need those on the back of my screen. And others, like the rules for buying magic items, are less of an issue because I don't tend to have magic item shops in my games anymore. And if there is a situation where a magic item might be available to buy, like an auction or something, that will usually be set up in an earlier session, so I'll have time to prep and add the most relevant stuff to my notes. Most of the things I wish were on the screen either don't apply to me anymore because I know the system well enough to remember or find the answer, or because I've already found a workaround through my notes and prep. So essentially, this screen works for me. I could just use this in my games and I'd be perfectly happy. Now, the GM screen I use now only has 2 empty slots, so I can only see 2 things at a time. However, I don't necessarily need all 4 panels in front of me at all times. For example, one of these panels is purely about travel and food and drink. Once the party goes into combat, I don't need that page in front of me anymore, so I can move it behind the page with the actions in combat. I can keep the page with the DCs out at all times and tuck the other conditions behind it, since the conditions are also in the back of the player's handbook, pretty easy to access when I need to. And sure enough, I went online and I found some scans of the inside of this DM screen, and I printed them off and added them to the inside of my own screen. And I think it's going to work really well. And the few things where I wish there was more detail, like how I wish the damage by level and severity chart also had the rules for improvised damage or traps, well, I could just jot down the page number for where those rules appear in the DMG. Then if they come up during the game, I could whip out the book and find them and come up with an answer pretty quickly. Like I said earlier, this will be basically my first time running an in-person game in years, so I might have to adjust things a little bit for future games. But right now I don't think I need anything super fancy besides what comes in the reincarnated screen. In fact, whenever I was running virtual games, I would often try to set up the GM screen behind my laptop, but the laptop would block some of the panels, or I would put it maybe in front of my laptop screen, but then it would block the screen, and that didn't work either. But I wanted to use this during my games because it actually served me really well. That being said, obviously there's a new edition coming out very soon. Like, I know it's not technically a new edition, but there's going to be some rules changes, and that's definitely going to make my DM screen defunct whenever I eventually switch over. I mean, if nothing else, I will probably need to fill my DM screen with just the things that have changed, so I can just have some chance of keeping up with them and keeping them all straight. Now, there is a new Dungeon Master screen coming out in November, along with the new Dungeon Master's Guide. And once again, I hope it's good. I want the new DM screen to be as useful as the reincarnated screen, the one I've used for several years now. But I'm also preparing myself for the possibility, and in fact the likelihood, that I won't like the new DM screen in some way. It's going to have some aspects to a design that I don't vibe with. There'll be stuff that I wish they'd included and stuff that I could have done without. And I won't necessarily know what those things are until I take it for a spin and I see how it does. I'll have to see which panels and charts I reference all the time, which ones I never look at, and which rules I keep having to look up because they're not on the back of the screen. But as I've proven before, even if I do bring the official DM screen to my games, I have no problem marking it up to include the things that I actually need in order to run my games. But again, that's where I'm at. But what about you? Do you use a GM screen? Do you use one of the official releases, or is yours customizable? What rule do you always need on the back of your screen because you just can't remember it without some help? For me, it's the conditions, prices of goods in town, and the jumping rules. I can never remember the jumping rules. But let me know your answers in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Let YouTube know that you like me and you'd like to see more of my stuff. Support me on Patreon. That is the best way to help my channel. It keeps the lights on and helps pay those gimmicks they keep sending in the mail called bills. You can also join my Discord server and hang out with other awesome people, and sign up for my newsletter to catch my updates. If you live in the good old US of A, make sure you're registered to vote. It only takes a second, and it's going to be pretty important this year. Go watch my video where I discuss all the monster manual covers throughout the years. That was a very fun video to put together. Until next time, play fair, and have fun.